back. And I looked, I was in the wrong Zoom room. We're one after, so I'll let you hit record and I think we'll get started. So first I'll just say good afternoon to everybody and welcome to Diets Debunked. My name is Nikki Johnson and I'm really excited to have everybody here today to talk about diets and healthy eating practices. I did want to give everybody just a really quick background into me, I guess, if you will. I work for the University of Minnesota Extension and North Dakota State University Extension as a community health and nutrition specialist. But I've been a part of the Extension family in some capacity for the last 12 years. I spend most of my time currently working in chronic disease prevention and really focus on helping people to find ways to incorporate healthier behaviors into their everyday lives. I'm also a registered dietitian. So on the screen here, you are going to see what I would say is a loose outline for our time together. I want to cover some of these main topics, such as diets, eating patterns, and some personal goals. But with that being said, if at any time you have questions, please feel free to add them into the chat, and I'm going to do my best to answer them as they come up, as long as they fit. If it's something I know I'll get to a little bit later, I might hold on to it for just a few moments. Now, I should also state that I cannot promise that I can answer every single question immediately, simply because knowing every intricacy of all of the diets out there would completely overload my mental capacity. But if I'm unable to answer your question today, I will certainly follow up with you and the rest of the group. If during our time any technical issues should come up, please feel free to reach out to Diane, who is my co-host for today. You can see her lovely picture on the screen there. How about that, Tracy? Is that a little bit better? Can everybody else hear me okay? If you can, give me a little thumbs up on your reaction. That'll help me out. Okay, thank you. Thank you, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, so with that, let's get started. So to kick us off this afternoon, I want to talk about the word diet, because there's a million different definitions out there and a lot of different feelings about the word. So I'm curious, what comes to mind when you hear the word diet? And go ahead and add that to the chat. What comes to mind when you hear the word diet? Weight loss, restrictions, what you're eating. Any other thoughts? Cutting out, work, short term, food log, eating pattern, okay? Lots of different things, right? Hungry. Now, thinking about the word diet, okay, we've got some terms here that or words that might be popping up, but I'm wondering, are there any feelings that bubble up when you hear the word diet? If so, add those to the chat. Any feelings that bubble up when you hear the word diet? Frustration, fear. Thanks, Diane. Negative, deprived, control. Craving. Wonderful. Thanks so much for adding those. I think tough. Yeah, I think it's nice to see the collective terminology that people come up with. And it's not really surprising that there's a lot of different definitions to what a diet means and the feelings, thoughts, and ideas that are really tied to that word. Even when you look up the word diet in the dictionary, there's a few different definitions are found. So it's no wonder that we get confused, right? So a diet might be defined as the kinds of food that a person, animal, or community habitually eats. Or It could be defined as a special course of food to which one restricts oneself, either to lose weight or for medical reasons. Most of the time, this is the second one here, the one that's bolded, is the one that really seems to stick. Okay, this is a lot of times the definition that the people kind of come to when they hear that word diet. And it doesn't mean that diets are bad, but again, oftentimes when we hear the word diet, they're referring to that second definition. Now, to help us from getting confused today, we're going to use two different terms to talk about our food choices and our eating plans. So for diet, we're going to use that special course of food to which one restricts oneself. And we're also going to use eating pattern. And for that, we're going to define it as a combination of foods and beverages that make up an individual's complete dietary intake over time. Okay, so we're going to use both of these, but I wanted to make sure that we had two really set definitions. Now let's talk about diets to start us off. Now I hear about dieting a lot, and I'm sure that you do too. And it's in part because many people go on a diet every year. In fact, according to the International Food Information Council, 4 in 10 American adults went on a diet this year alone. And they probably have been on many diets or a diet in the past. So I'm curious about those of you in the room today. I'm going to launch a quick poll here. It should pop up on your screen. But I want to hear from you. This is anonymous. Have you ever been on a diet? And we've got a few choices to choose from. Yes, and I was incredibly successful. Yes, but I'd rather not talk about it. Maybe not your favorite experience. Not yet, but I plan to start Monday. Famous last words. And no, thankfully, I haven't ever had to be on a diet. Just a couple more people. Give you a few more seconds to answer that. All right, so I'm going to share these results. These should pop up on your screen here. But just in this room of 27 people, 79% of you indicated that you have been on a diet before. Okay, so it's something that is common practice, right? And so it's really important to be able to identify a diet that's going to be safe and sustainable, something that you can be really successful in, and also be able to identify or spot some of those diets that maybe aren't going to produce the results that you're hoping for. Or to get you to those results, it's taking you in a path that's maybe not as healthy as you want it to be. Now, when we think about dieting, there's a lot of different reasons why a person might choose to go on what we call a diet. The top reasons are to lose weight. So about 30% of people start a diet to lose weight. About 37% start a diet to protect their long-term health or to prevent any future health conditions. Some people simply want to feel better or have more energy. And some even go on a diet just to help to better manage a health condition they already have. For others, it might be just a combination of all of these, but these are some of those top reasons. Now I'm curious, what diets are you currently hearing about? Because I am a dietitian, I tend to hear about a lot of them, but I'm curious as to what your friends are talking about or your family talking about, maybe even your participants. Noom, keto, lots of keto. I had a feeling that was going to happen. Some fasting, okay. Shift, Atkins, whole food, plant-based, low FODMAP. Okay, good. Thanks for adding those in there. So while we're not going to be able to cover every single diet out there today, we are going to touch on several of these. Oftentimes the diets we hear about are what we call a fad diet. Now, a fad is defined as an intense and widely shared enthusiasm for something, especially one that is short-lived and without basis. People who are taking part in a fad diet are often very committed to their beliefs. And because of that, they may be resistant to learning more or even changing their beliefs despite overwhelming evidence. A lot of times I dub these fad diets as a major reason for yo-yo dieting, where you see a person's weight ebb and flow or go up and down. And that's because fad diets are most often not sustainable. They give people this false hope, but don't often give them the necessary tools to be successful long-term. So I want you to take a look at each of the items listed on the screen here. This is kind of like my little list of red flags, if you will. So when a diet can check off the items on the list here, I know we're hitting fad diet territory, and it's something that I really want people to pause and think about before they start to follow that particular diet. So the first one being claims sound too good to be true. Okay, hey, if you join this diet or you decide to participate in this diet, no exercise is required. All you have to do is X, Y, and Z. A fad diet oftentimes also promises really quick results with very little effort. I always think late night infomercial. Okay, take this supplement and you can lose up to 10 pounds this week, right? Really quick results. And you don't really have to do anything. Just remember to take your pill in the morning. Oftentimes, a fad diet also includes sales of some sort. If you look at the website or if a friend is telling you about it, in order to participate in this diet, you have to buy a food plan. You have to buy a powder, a drink, or a supplement of some sort. You need to purchase the plan. That's definitely going to be a red flag for me. Sounds like it is money fueled rather than health fueled. Fad diets also oftentimes limit entire food groups, which means that you are being limited in really important nutrients. So one way to spot what I would consider a fad diet is if a food group is completely absent. So we've got our 5 food groups. We've got fruits, veggies, whole grains, protein, and dairy, right? 5 food groups. If any diet is eliminating an entire food group, I would definitely be wary. A fad diet also is pretty quiet or does not communicate those risks or limitations of the approach or the diet itself. Meaning everything is in that really fine print. I always think of, again, maybe I'll go back to those infomercials or those commercials about a certain plan. And right at the bottom of the screen in super tiny font with a little asterisk next to it, it says results not typical, right? That should definitely be a red flag to you. And finally, limited reviewed studies or the source of the study is questionable. So anytime that there is a well-studied eating pattern or diet out there, there's going to be replicated studies. You're going to see that it works for this population over and over and over and over again. If you don't see those research studies, or maybe it's a very small study, again, I would take a pause and really think about deciding whether or not to follow that diet because it might not be exactly what you're looking for. Now, I noticed in the chat, keto came up several different times. And when I hear a fad diet these days, keto is definitely one that is at the top. Friends, family, coworkers bring it up all the time, right? And what we hear about the keto diet is, oh my gosh, you can lose so much weight. My neighbor lost 50 pounds doing the keto. It isn't that hard, right? All you have to do is just avoid carbs. And you know what? Carbs are so bad for you anyways. This is what we hear, right? This is what we're hearing from our friends, families, and neighbors. And of course, anything that would have been made with the grain is replaced with cauliflower crust, cauliflower rice, and it all tastes so good, right? That's what they tell you. Are there other things that you guys are hearing about keto? If you do, feel free to add that to the chat. I always think it's interesting to see that. But the one major draw to the keto diet in mainstream culture right now is the quick and dramatic weight loss that can occur. So while you're hearing, yes, all this weight loss can occur, and there is some truth to that, it's also really important that we look at the science behind this as well. So we hear all these things, but the science behind the keto is really that it was developed originally as a way to treat epilepsy, and it was considered to be therapeutic. What it is, it's a high fat, high protein eating pattern that includes very, very little carbohydrates. So to put that into a little bit of perspective, for the average American adult, according to the dietary guidelines, is that you want to get between 45 and 65% of your total daily calories from carbohydrates. And the reason that number is so high is because that's the body's preferred energy source. Okay. The body likes carbohydrates, uses those to break down for its preferred energy. For a person following a ketogenic diet, they are consuming between only 5 and 10% of their calories from carbohydrates. So a really drastic change in the body's main fuel source. So that's going to do something internally. In order to reduce the number of carbohydrates a person is consuming on this diet, they're not only cutting out those sugary foods, but they're also going to be cutting out food groups, things like fruits and grains. Why would that be concerning? Well, fruits and grains are going to be really high in fiber. We're going to be missing out on essential nutrients. Our fruit are going to have a lot of vitamin C, phytochemicals or phytonutrients that our body uses to fight off free radicals. Our grain foods, again, not only are going to provide us with energy, but we get a lot of B vitamins and iron from our grain foods as well. So it's eliminating those food groups. Now, we've got some drawbacks there, right? We're eliminating food groups. It was originally designed to be a therapeutic diet, but recent studies have shown that the keto diet can be a really effective short-term and possibly medium-term tool to fight obesity. So that weight loss piece is there. The thing that you have to be really cautious of is that the keto diet is not meant to be long-term, which can be a struggle, right? You've been eating a certain way for maybe 6 months or 9 months even, and then you have to completely shift back to your old way of eating. This tends to lead to weight gain once you have had to move off of the keto way. So while there is some really good evidence for the ketogenic diet in the short term, it's not something that's going to be sustainable long term. Another diet or fad diet that I hear about a lot are detoxes or cleanses. And these always give me a little bit of a giggle and a little bit of a cringe too. What I tend to hear is that, hey, I'm going on a cleanse to lose a few pounds before my high school reunion or before the holidays. I also hear that these diet or detox diets and cleanses rid your body of toxin. They make you feel so energized, right? And of course, they're endorsed by a host of celebrities, making them really popular in the mainstream. In reality, though, detox diets aren't going to be so great. So there's a lot of different diets that claim to be cleanses or detoxes, and there's not one set definition. In addition to like the cleanse portion of a detox diet, the plans that go along with them are very, very different. There isn't, again, a set definition of what a detox or cleanse might look like. Some of the things, though, that are common among all detoxes and cleanses is that they are going to be incredibly low in calories. Very, very strict dietary components. The one that you see there, the master cleanse, that is lemon juice, maple syrup, cayenne pepper, and sometimes even laxatives. And the idea is that this cleanse is going to help them to rid their body of toxins and to lose weight. However, that is not what happens. Toxin elimination through something like this has found to have very, very little clinical evidence to support it. And because you are essentially not eating food, or you're eating very little food, you are missing out on essential nutrients and calories that you need to thrive and survive. When you are cutting your calories really low in something like a detox diet or a cleanse, you can actually cause your body to release additional stress hormones like cortisol, which might actually have negative downstream effects, including appetite stimulation, which can lead to this rebounding weight gain, or that yo-yoing. In addition, so the body naturally detoxifies itself. We've got kidneys, we've got a liver, we've got these systems set up within our own bodies to naturally detoxify. Drinking a special drink or having a special tea is not going to help your body to release or get rid of any toxins. What is going to happen though, if you are doing a detox or a cleanse, oftentimes you're going to have some agitation in your intestinal tract, right? Very little food, some irritants to your intestines. So you're going to be spending a lot of time in the bathroom. I can't imagine this would be a very fun situation to put yourself into, and definitely not something that would be recommended. In fact, it can be quite harmful to follow a cleanse or a detox diet if you have any type of medical condition. So definitely no solid science behind a detox diet, and I would avoid if at all possible. The Whole30 is another one that I have heard lots and lots about. And what you hear about the Whole30 diet a lot of times is it is only 30 days, right? You can do anything for 30 days. During these 30 days, you're going to eat real whole food, nothing processed. You're not going to be dining out. Everything is real whole foods. And when you follow this for 30 days, you are going to see improved sleep. You're going to see improved energy, improved love, and improved mood. Might even lead to some weight loss. In reality, the Whole30 is what we would consider an elimination diet. Okay, it's this short-term nutrition reset. Okay, while it does encourage the intake of whole foods, there is a lot of items that you would have to completely eliminate from your diet. Added sugars, alcohol, legumes or beans, which are so good for you, soy, dairy, MSG, sulfites, any processed foods or foods not on the approved list. And you are also not to step on the scale or take any measurements during these 30 days. So if I told you all today that starting this afternoon, as soon as this session is done, you are no longer to eat any of the items on this list here for 30 days, what's the first thing that's going to pop into your mind? You can't have any of these foods. No, thank you. Right? You're like, there's no way this is happening. No, thanks. So oftentimes when we've got this, you can't do something mentality, you know, you can't have ice cream for 30 days. You can't have cheese for 30 days. People tend to become hyper-focused on that particular item, where all you can think about are the things that you can't eat. So there's a lot of restriction, lots of label reading, lots of cooking. This particular plan requires serious planning and food preparation. One expert even stated that this diet is the antithesis of a long-term healthy dietary pattern, which I found to be really, really interesting. Yes, there's a lot of great ideas and thoughts behind this. Yeah, we know we should be cooking at home more often. Yes, we know we should be eating less processed foods and we should be eating more whole foods. But doing that every single day for every single meal sometimes just simply isn't realistic. And it doesn't mean that if you have a processed food or every meal isn't made of whole foods only, that you're not eating a healthy eating pattern, right? There's a lot of variation we can have in our eating pattern. So this is not necessarily the route to take. Again, some good can come from this, but it is definitely restrictive and is meant only for the short term. I actually had one dietitian friend who followed this and did this with her family not too long ago. And she said it was, while she was proud of herself for completing it, it is not something she would ever, ever, ever do again, nor recommend to anybody else, simply because the amount of work that she spent planning and preparing everything. Next, we've got intermittent fasting. So intermittent fasting, I think, is something that I've heard more and more about over the last year or two. And intermittent fasting has a lot of different forms. Okay, there isn't, again, one single definition of intermittent fasting, but ultimately it involves fasting or taking a break from eating. Some common takes on intermittent fasting are time restricted feeding or intermittent calorie restriction. So intermittent fasting includes eating patterns for extending periods of time, say between 16 hours and 48 hours, with little to no food intake, mixed in with periods of eating as much as you desire. Okay, so you might not eat for 16 to 48 hours, but then you're going to get a chunk of time where you get to eat anything you want. This time restricted feeding version is where you are restricting your food intake to a window of time, say 8 to 10 hours or less every day of the week. And then fasting for the rest of the day. So the 16 hours to 14 hours the rest of the day. And you're going to do that every single day of the week. So far in clinical trials, both the calorie restriction and intermittent fasting have shown some degrees of weight loss and even some improvements in insulin sensitivity. But despite the fact that it could be a promising weight loss method, so far all of the trials around intermittent fasting and the studies around intermittent fasting have been fairly small sample sizes and for not a long time frame. And so what we're saying right now is, yes, intermittent fasting could potentially be a way for individuals to lose weight. We need to do more research on it right now. It's still pretty new. We need to be able to see what those long-term effects are. So right now, if this is something you're kind of kicking around, I would hold off on it for just a bit until we've got a little more research on what that means for our bodies long-term. The other thing I always encourage people to think about if you are entertaining the idea of intermittent fasting is think to yourself, how do you feel when you skip a meal? How do you feel when you skip a meal? Sometimes I'm grouchy. If I've let it go on for too long, I am grabbing everything in sight, doesn't matter what it is. I might be eating copious amounts of food. Yeah, okay, bummed, hungry, definitely. So oftentimes we don't make good food choices when we're in a hot state. Okay, we're feeling a little frazzled. Our mind is not really putting the health aspect in the forefront. Instead, it's just saying, hey, my body needs fuel. That's sort of that hot state mentality. So I always think that's one way to be thinking about whether or not intermittent fasting could be a good choice for you is think about how you behave when you haven't had a meal in a while. And then imagine doing that every single day or not fueling yourself for multiple days. I also like to point out that intermittent fasting, if you have ever had any type of eating disorder, might not be a route to take because it almost promotes a binge purge pattern of eating. So if that's ever been a concern for you, or if you know somebody else who is looking into intermittent fasting and they have a history of disordered eating, I would definitely tend to shy away from that. So diets, we talked about them being really restrictive. A lot of times they are selling something, and they're definitely not something that is sustainable. Again, all of the diets that we just discussed, whether or not it was the Whole30, if it was the keto diet or intermittent fasting, they're meant to be short term. It's not sustainable. And because it's not sustainable, that often leads to that weight loss and then regain, that yo-yo effect on your weight, if you will. And a lot of times these diets, while they talk about the specific foods that you should be eating or shouldn't be eating for that matter, it doesn't address what I would consider a real life situation, right? What am I supposed to do when there's a birthday party? What am I supposed to do when I'm on vacation? What happens when I've got a work function and I don't get to choose my foods, right? Those diets don't address those real life situations. So instead, I typically, when I talk to people about making healthier food choices, whether, despite what your goals might be, is focus on eating patterns. Find eating patterns that are going to fit for you. So when we talk about an eating pattern, this is really looking at the food you are consuming over a chunk of time, over a period of time. And typically when we look at eating patterns, there's a lot more balance, variety, and little to no restriction. So we're not saying you can't have certain food groups. Again, we're looking at balance and variety. We're choosing foods that are going to be high in fiber and really nutrient dense. Okay, they're going to be really good for you. They're going to fuel your body in a really awesome way. Eating patterns are also going to look at sustainability. So something that's going to last really long term, something that you could do tomorrow and still be comfortable with doing 10 years from now or 20 years from now. And these eating patterns often include social factors as well as movement, something the majority of those diets or those fad diets do not address. So one thing that these eating patterns have in common is really focusing on variety, nutrient density, and amount. And the first thing that I think about when discussing variety is variety of food groups. Again, we've got our 5 food groups that we should be choosing foods from each day, unless of course you have some type of allergy where you need to avoid a specific food or food group. But each of those different food groups is going to provide us with a different mix of nutrients that our body needs in order to function at the highest possible level. And the next thing that comes to mind when I hear variety is that we need variety within our food groups as well. So by eating a variety within food groups, we ensure that we are getting all the nutrient our body needs to be strong and healthy. I always like to use the example of broccoli, okay? We know broccoli is good for us, low in calories, loaded with vitamins and minerals. But if we only ate broccoli as a vegetable, our bodies are going to be missing out on a lot of other amazing nutrients that we would find in things like eggplant or red peppers or onions. So it's really important to mix things up. Nutrient density kind of fits into the variety too. So choosing foods that are going to be really rich in nutrients, things like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean protein, low fat dairy. things that are going to give us a big bang of nutrients, vitamins, minerals, and whatnot, but not be overloaded with calories. And finally, amount. Choosing the right amounts for you, your age, your weight, your gender, your physical activity level, all of that plays into the quantity of the foods that you should be eating. I love this about eating patterns because there's never anything said that you can't have a food. There's always a place for the foods that you love. In your eating pattern, it's really just figuring out the frequency and the amount that's right for you. So let's look at a couple of these eating patterns that have been shown to be really effective in our health outcomes. And let's also look at just what do each of these eating patterns entail. So the first one here is often referred to as the DASH diet, but it's really an eating pattern, and it's dietary approaches to stop hypertension. This is a really flexible and balanced eating plan that helps to create a heart-healthy eating style for life. This eating plan requires no special foods. Okay, so you're not having to purchase anything special. You don't need, again, a powder or a supplement or anything like that. Instead, what it's asking people to do that are following this plan, it's going to give them daily and weekly nutritional goals. The plan recommends eating vegetables, fruits, and whole grains, including fat-free or low-fat dairy products, choosing fish, poultry, beans, nuts, and vegetable oils, and then limiting some of those less healthy food items. So food items that are high in saturated fats, such as fatty meats or full-fat dairy products, things like tropical oils like coconut or palm kernel oil, and then limiting sugar sweetened beverages and sweets. So this particular diet, now, or excuse me, eating pattern, while it is specific to hypertension or addresses that within its title, and it is definitely effective in that. Studies even show that it can lower your blood pressure in as little as 2 weeks, but it's also good for overall heart health and can be used by absolutely anyone. So it's shown to lower some of those bad cholesterols and lower your risk for things like heart disease and stroke. But again, this is an eating pattern that anyone could adopt and be considered healthy no matter what stage of their life. The next eating pattern here I wanted to touch base on is the Mediterranean diet. Now, the traditional Mediterranean diet is characterized by a high intake of olive oil, fruit, nuts, vegetables, and cereals, a medium intake of fish and poultry, and then a lower amount of dairy products, red meat, processed meats, and sweets. They do include some wine in moderation, but they encourage people to consume that with meal and to consume that with friends. So in the Mediterranean diet, again, they are really focusing primarily on plant-based foods, fruits, veggies, whole grains, legumes, and nuts. They are going to encourage the use of herbs and spices to make things taste yummy instead of salt to flavor their foods. And they also limit the use of red meat to no more than a few times a month. So a little bit different than what our traditional American diet would be. Now, if a person were to follow the Mediterranean eating plan, again, remember, think over a period of time. They're going to say you want between 7 to 10 servings of fruit and veggies a day. They want you to look for those whole grain food options. So brown rice, whole wheat, things along that line. Oatmeal. Opt for olive oil over butter or margarine. Choose fish or seafood twice a week. Eat beans and poultry and fish over red meat. And what we know and what we've seen is that studies show when people are following this Mediterranean eating plan, they see a decreased incidence of a variety of chronic conditions: hypertension, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, among stroke, heart disease, things like that. And the reason I really like this Mediterranean eating plan is that it focuses on shared values and a way of eating and living rather than focusing on macronutrients or micronutrients. Okay. It's really about the lifestyle rather than a diet and choosing specific foods. So the DASH eating pattern and the Mediterranean eating pattern are two really solid options that don't require the purchase of specialty items, encourage a lot of variety and balance, a reduction of highly processed foods, and really encourages the social aspect of eating. Now, while both of the eating patterns that I mentioned there can lead to weight loss and definitely have other health benefits to them, I did want to simply mention what a healthy weight loss pattern or eating pattern might look like if that is your primary focus, because I know entering this time of year, it tends to be on people's minds. So what does healthy weight loss look like? The first thing I always like to talk to people about is the actual weight loss itself. Weight loss should be done very, very gradually, no more than 1 to 2 pounds per week. The reason for that is when you're losing just 1 to 2 pounds a week, your body typically loses more fat than lean muscle. But anytime you lose a pound of weight, you do lose a little mix of both. If you are losing more than 1 to 2 pounds per week, you're actually going to be losing more lean muscle. We want to maintain that. That helps to burn calories faster. So slow, gradual weight loss. By losing weight more slowly, it's also easier to maintain that weight loss. A healthy weight loss plan should also include physical activity. So adults need a minimum of 30 minutes of physical activity each day. Probably are all thinking like, oh, I know this. But it is something that can absolutely help you to reach a weight loss goal. Plus really just helps with energy, mood, and whatnot. There also should be some dietary changes with healthy weight loss. And the key is to moderate, not eliminate. So watching portion sizes can be a really easy way to cut back without cutting out foods that you love. You know, if you want to cut back on sugar, drink water instead of sugary beverages or eat desserts less often. But those dietary changes should really think about balanced nutrients with a variety of foods and try to reduce those highly processed items. Sorry, I'll pause for just a second here. Sally, I see you need to pop off. I can definitely share some of the PowerPoint slides when we send out our items later. And finally, with healthy weight loss or any healthy eating pattern, we really want to think about sustainability. You know, if a weight loss program is highly restrictive or has a manual for just the rules, it's not likely to be sustainable. It's not something you're going to be able to do day in, day out for a long time. So it's best to have a plan that not only aids a person in weight loss, but can then be transitioned into weight maintenance without these huge changes. So when I think about an eating pattern or wanting to make a change in being healthier overall, I always say start small, be mindful, and track. So first, choose one small change you're willing to make to become healthier. One. Okay, oftentimes we take up too big of a chunk of something to tackle and we get overwhelmed and we don't do it after a couple of days. A good example is like, okay, I'm going to get into shape. I'm going to go to the gym for 60 minutes. I'm going to do this machine and I'm going to lift these weights. And the next day I can't move my arms or my legs, and going up and down stairs is nearly impossible, right? I overdid it. I did too much. And you know what's going to happen? I'm not going to follow through with my plan the next day or the next day or the next day. Instead, we want to start with those really small, tiny pieces. So maybe the first thing in your new healthy eating pattern is you're going to drink more water. You're going to drink 1 more cup of water per day. Do that. Practice it. Try it out for a week. See what worked, what didn't. Write it down. Okay, today's Monday. I said I was going to start drinking 1 more cup of water per day. Did you do it today? Again, mark it down on a piece of paper. Track it in your planner, something along those lines. As you're doing that tracking, you should always celebrate your progress. We tend to get really, really down on ourselves. It's super easy to be like, okay, you know what? Yesterday, I totally blew all of my goals because I ate 5 spritz cookies. Real story. I ate a bunch of spritz cookies yesterday. It was probably more than 5. But that doesn't completely deter all of the progress that I've made over the last several weeks in making good food choices, right? So instead of dwelling on the things that I maybe didn't do so well, find the things that you are doing well. All right, I didn't do, or I had way too many cookies yesterday, but you know what? I actually had 3 extra cups of water compared to what I normally have. That's great. That's huge. 3 times the goal that I had actually set out to. So celebrate the progress, no matter how little it is. And finally, extend yourself some grace if things don't go as planned. Things happen. Stuff comes up. Don't let it completely derail you. Instead, really think about that moment as a learning moment. Okay, you know what? This birthday party or this holiday gathering really threw me off my game. I know I've got a couple more coming up in the next few weeks here. What am I going to do to help to set myself up for success during that time? What can I do differently? Game plan a little bit. And as you are starting small and kind of tracking things down, once you feel like you've tackled that first small goal, start a new one. But really make sure that you have incorporated it into your daily lifestyle, into your routine. Okay. If you haven't quite hit that routine level yet, keep sticking to it. Once you have that successfully done, then you can move on to the next little thing. So again, start small, practice, track it. Tracking is huge. Celebrate that progress and extend yourself some grace. Now, I know we went through a lot of information today, whether it was diet, how to kind of spot those red flags, what a healthy eating pattern looks like. But if you are ever unsure, when in doubt, ask a dietitian, ask the professionals. Is this something that's going to be safe for me? Is this the right plan for me? Because again, anytime you're looking at a diet, it's going to be different for every single person. And not always understanding what a condition might do or how a diet might affect it can be really scary. So always talk to a professional if you're unsure. You can always be referred to a healthcare professional. Maybe you don't have a dietitian. Talk to your physician, your primary care physician, about reaching out to that dietitian. Or maybe there is a certified nutritionist on staff that you can talk to, but talk to someone. And finally, do some additional research. And I don't mean just a straight Google search, because you can find any answer out there. But instead, look for those research studies. Look for studies that have been replicated, that you have seen the results year after year, study after study. Now, anytime I talk about healthy eating, it usually is because somebody has the desire to want to make a change in their own lives, right? So before we move into questions for today, I want everybody to just pause, take a moment to think about one small change that you want to make today or over the next week. And I want you to jot it down somewhere. Maybe it's a scratch piece of paper. I'm guessing everybody's on a screen of some sort. Maybe you're just making a note on your tablet or in a Word doc. But think about one small change that you want to accomplish over the next week or next couple of weeks. That's going to be your first step. Just start with that one thing. And if you get really brave, you don't have to share it with me today, but it can be really helpful if you share your goals with an accountability buddy. So if you're feeling really brave, share it with somebody today. And with that, I definitely wanted to give everybody a chance to ask some questions about any specific diets or eating plans or eating patterns that they have maybe heard about, want to know a little bit more about. I'll do my best to answer them. I know we had one that was shared prior to our session today. Someone had asked about Revital You. So I did a little bit of digging into that. What I found, and I don't remember who asked this particular question, but Revital You, from what I could see, it doesn't actually look like a diet at all. It looked more like product sales from what I was seeing. And there was a few things that kind of stuck out to me. Some things that were cool, as well as a few red flags. So the first thing that I really appreciated, so this particular company, there was a lot of focus on like eco-consciousness and how they ship their products, what goes into their products. All of their items are organic. So there's some cool things there. However, the site itself was really all about sales and people purchasing a product in order to reach a certain desired health outcome. That's obviously a red flag for me. But the other thing that I didn't see anything about the qualifications of the developers of this particular program or organization. They look like very nice people. I have no idea what their backgrounds are. They aren't doctors, they aren't dietitians. I could not honestly find anything about their qualifications. So that makes me really, really nervous. So, you know, who did they work with to create these products? Why are they the ones doing this health plan or trying to sell this? So just a little bit about that. Let's see, I saw Becky added in the chat, a couple of things in the chat here. Diane added our evaluation for today. So yeah, please take a moment to complete that before you head out for the day. Meal boxes that are sent to your home. Becky, can you, if you want to, you can unmute, but tell me a little bit more about that question. What are you wanting to know?
Well, like, you know, like HelloFresh or Blue Apron, they would provide a meal for you that they ship to your house.
Mhm.
And like, usually it's, I don't know, I've never done it, but it's well-rounded, I'm going to call it maybe. But is that like, I feel like we're all busy and like that we never have time to actually make a meal. And so like, would that be beneficial in the long run? I know it's buying a product, but
Right. So with those meal services, that isn't necessarily about, they're not trying to sell you a diet, right? Yet they are selling you something. They're selling you a meal service. But it's more about selling convenience. What I like about those meal boxes that can be sent to your home, like you said, they typically are pretty well rounded. They're including at least 3 food groups per meal. Usually they're portioned out pretty well so that you don't have super huge quantities. If you're just serving 1 or 2, you can usually pick how many people you're trying to serve. You can also pick the meals that make the most sense to you and how frequently they're delivered. So it could be a huge benefit to some people, right? If it fits into your budget and you think it would help you to cook at home more, you know, I'd say try it out. However, that's not going to be the right fit for everybody. Some people are like, there's no way I'm ordering a box of food that's going to be shipped to me. They're just not happening it. So that's kind of where I think about when with these eating patterns. I don't like when it kind of paints you into this specific box, right? Because what works for me isn't necessarily going to work for Diane, and what works for Diane isn't necessarily going to work for Letty. We have to really figure out how to make these healthy food choices that fits into our day to day. So yeah, Becky, it could be good for you if that's something you want to try. I have no qualms against those meal services. Let's see. Any tips for reducing sugar and sugar cravings? Oh, that is such a tough one, Tracy. I would say for my tips and tricks is a little bit often, or little cutting back on the frequency of those items, or choosing those items in a more whole food form. So instead of going for the cake and ice cream type of sugary sweet, opt for fruit or something with fruit. So at least you're going to be hitting some of those nutritious items as well. Other questions? You can keep adding them into the chat. We still have a few minutes left. But in case people have to duck out, I did want to just really, really quickly point out that we do have a whole new slew of webinars coming up after the new year. This is just a sampling of things that are going to be coming up. Since you registered for today, you will get an email announcing our new series once they're available. But you are all the first to get a sneak peek into what's happening in the new year with family development at the University of Minnesota Extension. Any other questions for me today? Let's see. There are a lot of questions and debate about hormones, pesticides, things like that. Not anything that I think I would want to dig into deeply today, Renee, but I would definitely be happy to follow up and send a few different resources that I have at my disposal. And Becky, I just saw your comment about beef. So again, it doesn't mean that beef is bad. Beef is definitely something that can be a part of a healthy eating pattern. It's really just thinking about quantity, frequency, and sometimes even just thinking about the cut of beef as well. Choosing something that's maybe a little bit more lean versus something that's got heavy marbling and additional fat in it. I know we're at 3 o'clock here. So thank you all for joining today. I really appreciate all of your participation. This was fantastic. I will stick around for a few more minutes if anybody does have additional questions.